is such a good one that when we judge rulers, I mean, a ruler cannot allow his people he cannot say, I believe in ahimsa, non-violence. Because you have to have, Bhishma explains to him that if you are attacked, you need to defend your country. And this was the problem Gandhi faced, with the ahimsa. And that's why, I think we were lucky we had the British as our enemies. What if it had been Hitler on the other side? He wouldn't have listened to ahimsa of Gandhi.
Very generic question. Where do you draw the line? So, in case of IPL, one side is, so much of entrepreneurial zeal and people enjoy it and everything. But at the same time, it really dragged down what accomplishments, good things could have been done out of it. So, same on the doing good. I can go on doing good for 50 people, they will be in the line. But where I'm taking from, what I'm doing for myself.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
No, that's exactly the question, actually, the Mahabharata is also asking. That Mahabharata also means balance, upholding a balance of certain kinds. And the system, the capitalist system depends on that balance. In this global financial crisis, that was partly the problem, that the balance was tipped. And so I think that you have to reason it out. Look, dharma is not like learning the names of the rivers of India or the United States. It's difficult to be good. And the subtitle of my book is On the Subtle Art of Dharma. That's the word the Mahabharata uses. In that scene which I told you about Draupadi, when she looks at Bhishma, and Bhishma is quiet. But before he remains silent. When he's talking, she asks, who did you lose? Who did my husband lose first, me or himself? And Bhishma at that time answers, well, he's like a politician. He's on the one hand, the fact is that, look, you are right, that he did lose himself first. But on the other hand, even a slave does have a wife, and so why cannot a slave gamble his wife? So he says, dharma is sukshma, subtle. I don't know the answer. And this is often what happens in the Mahabharata.
We've all been talking about how India is going to, economist talks about how India is going to overtake China's growth. I'd like to play a little bit of devil's advocate over here. We've got this huge demographic dividend in India, but God forbid if there's an economic downturn again, and this youth which does not find employment, we're sitting on a time bomb of something that could go terribly wrong with this youth.
Yeah, you're right. You can never take anything for granted. No matter how optimistic I began by saying that I think now the economic future, we won't wipe out poverty, we'll bring it down to a manageable level. I still think that will happen, but you can have crises. But I don't think it matters now whether Mayawati rules or Manmohan Singh rules or Sonia Gandhi rules or Advani rules. Nobody will be able to kill the growth rate. I don't think so.
So it's got a momentum of its own.
What could stop it? Infrastructure? We've had the worst infrastructure for 25 years. It's getting better, actually. When we become the second fastest growing economy in the world. We've had terrible fiscal deficits. Despite that, we've become second. We've had such terrible governance. We've become the second fastest growing economy in the world. We have a question here.
On that point, do you think where we are in the Indian economy, the progress is held back partly by the Indian philosophy itself? Where what I mean by that is there's no clear-cut answers to things. Culturally, or even giving the example in the Mahabharata itself, there's no, you should stop, pause the moment before you're about to launch a war stop for a moment, are you doing the right thing? You know, those types of questions, or the way the Indian philosophy is, you should always ask questions or always think there is no one right answer, versus the West, where that, you know, general in the
Ten
West Point,
Commandments.
yeah, or the West Point commander, the day before, he's never going to ask that question. If that's what we're going to do, we're going to do that. So do you think that's actually holding back the progress, the economic?
Well, listen, you can't become a second fastest growing economy in the world if you're always doing that, right? These companies today, we have at least 30 companies today which are world class. And you don't become world class and global winners if you do that. So obviously, there is a pragmatism in the system which allows you to do things. So I'm very wary of cultural stereotypes. That, oh, Indians are like this, French are great lovers, you know, Italians are great, they've got great food, all that kind of thing. It doesn't work like that. Institutions, we have to fix our institutions.
Why don't we take a question from this side of the room?
So you mentioned the Satyam scandal, right? So that was an issue of corporate governance, and you spoke about poor governance. So now there are instances where there's a difference between what the regulations or the laws mean and what dharma would mean, or what is the right thing to do would be. How do you deal with that?
Well, this is a very good question, by the way. Because dharma means both law, regulator, what the regulator has to do. Plus, dharma also means self-restraint, what the individual has to do. Now, you need both. And it's a very fine line. Meaning, a regulator, we've suffered through 40 years of licensed Raj. That's the bad kind of regulator. So, I think the real challenge really is that we need both. We need a sense of Yudhishthira within the corporate world also. We would like our CEOs to say, like Yudhishthira does, I act because I must, which infuriates Draupadi. But that's what he says, I act because I must. Because he has a very clear sense, a clear compass of what he wants to do. And frankly, you know, capitalism requires both. Because you can't just depend on regulations. I mean, I owe money to Raj, and I write him a check. Well, he assumes that that check won't bounce. So there's a sense of trust that creates. Dharma also means trust. So that trust really is the foundation stone. The Dharma also is a foundation. Upholding is the original meaning of Dharma from in the Rig Veda. The upholding. In fact, I've been actually, my next book, Knopf have asked me to do a slim volume called The Dharma of Capitalism, based on, I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal in which I analyzed the global financial crisis, called it Dharma of Capitalism. And so, most of us believe that capitalism is actually, it may be efficient, but it's not moral. I disagree. Actually, there is a real foundation of Dharma. And the more I've sort of gone into it, I think the notion of Dharma is very, very, has some applicability.